back to the channel. Today we're going to unravel some incredibly complex events in Genoa. Rumors are circulating around the Newman family, but what's the truth? In this video, I'll summarize the plot points that will be revealed in the next episode. Stay tuned to see what happens.
Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the most thrilling dramas of Genoa City. Today is a spectacular day to unravel the latest, jaw-dropping twists on the young and the restless. Grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and let us explore the dark shadows creeping into the Abbott mansion. The stakes have never been higher, and the danger is closer than anyone could have ever imagined. A horrifying secret has just been exposed, sending violent shockwaves through the very foundation of Genoa City and shattering the fragile illusion of safety within the Abbott family sanctuary. The grand, historic Abbott mansion, a symbol of wealth, power, and enduring family legacy, has been quietly breached by a monster. The terrifying saga of Dr. Lawrence Markham, who was recently unmasked by the brilliant deductions of Tracy and Ashley Abbott as the sinister Martin Laurent, has escalated from a dangerous psychological game into a cold-blooded, meticulously calculated assassination plot. The nightmare began on what seemed like a quiet, unassuming evening. As the heavy mahogany doors and state-of-the-art security systems of the estate proved to be entirely useless against a man who has mastered the dark arts of deception, disguise, and infiltration, Diane Jenkins, still bearing the deep, invisible psychological scars of her recent captivity at the hands of this very madman, was walking through the dimly lit corridors of the mansion when her blood ran completely cold. As she quietly pushed open the heavy oak door to Jack Abbott's master bedroom, expecting to find her recovering husband resting peacefully after his brutal stabbing ordeal with Patty Williams, she was instead met with a sight that will forever haunt her nightmares. Standing over Jack's bed, shrouded in the heavy shadows of the room, was Dr. Lawrence Markham. He was not there to deliver a medical evaluation or to spew his twisted psychological rhetoric. He was standing with a chilling, lethal stillness, holding an instrument of death, his eyes locked onto the vulnerable patriarch of the Abbott family. Diane's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird as the horrifying reality washed over her. Markham was preparing to assassinate Jack right there in his sleep. Summoning a well of courage forged in the fires of her past traumas and her fierce, undeniable love for Jack, Diane did not scream or flee. Instead, she stepped fully into the room, confronting the monster face to face. The air in the room grew thick and suffocating as Diane demanded to know how he had bypassed the armed guards outside and what sick, twisted endgame he was playing. But Markham did not flinch. He did not show an ounce of fear or surprise at being caught. Instead, a slow, malevolent smile crept across his face, twisting his features into a mask of pure, unadulterated evil. He let out a low, mocking laugh that sent shivers down Diane's spine. He leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper, and left her with a cryptic, terrifying threat about Jack's impending doom. He made it abundantly clear that Diane's intervention was merely a temporary delay, not a permanent salvation. Before Diane could alert the authorities or physically attack him, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the hallway. In the blink of an eye, Markham vanished into the shadows, slipping out through a balcony door with the silent, terrifying grace of a trained phantom. Seconds later, Jack Abbott entered the room, having just returned from a late-night walk around the estate's secure perimeter. He found Diane trembling, her face pale as a ghost, her eyes wide with unspeakable terror. Frantically, Diane poured out the horrifying truth, explaining that the man who had held her hostage, the man who had orchestrated Patty's impossible prison break, was just standing over his bed with murder in his eyes. She pleaded with Jack to understand the magnitude of the danger they were in, her voice cracking with desperation and fear. Jack, however, reacted with a frustrating, albeit understandable, sense of denial. Still recovering from his severe physical wounds and exhausted by the endless psychological warfare that had plagued his family for weeks, Jack desperately wanted to believe that his home was a fortress. He wrapped his arms around a shaking Diane, attempting to soothe her frantic nerves. He pointed to the heavy police presence barricading the perimeter of the estate, the newly upgraded alarm systems, and the sheer impossibility of a known fugitive breaching their walls. Jack assured her that she was likely suffering from a trauma-induced hallucination, a cruel trick played by her mind after the horrors she had endured. He gently kissed her forehead, promising her that they were perfectly safe and that Markham was miles away, hiding from the statewide manhunt. But Diane knew the truth. She had looked into the eyes of a killer, and she knew that Jack's false sense of security was the very weapon Markham was counting on. Refusing to be a helpless victim and utterly unwilling to let the love of her life be slaughtered in his own home, Diane made a silent, ironclad vow to protect Jack at all costs. She knew that relying on the Genoa City Police Department was a fool's errand. Detective Burrow had already proven himself entirely incompetent when Markham, wearing a silicone mask, walked Patty Williams right out of a holding cell. If Jack was going to survive, Diane had to take matters into her own hands. As Jack slept, blissfully unaware of the Grim Reaper hovering over his life, Diane began a secret, exhaustive investigation. She meticulously combed through the mansion's security footage, searching for the microscopic glitch or tampered wire that allowed Markham to enter unseen. She scoured the dark corners of the internet and utilized every shady contact she had retained from her own dark past, desperate to understand Markham's true motives. What Diane uncovered during her covert, frantic investigation was a twist so shocking, so deeply sinister, that it completely altered the landscape of the threat against the Abbott family. Markham was not acting alone. He was not merely a rogue psychopath executing a personal vendetta, nor was he simply acting out of a twisted loyalty to Patty Williams. Diane discovered encrypted communications and hidden financial trails that revealed a horrifying truth. Dr. Lawrence Markham had accepted a highly lucrative, meticulously planned assassination contract. He was a hired gun, a lethal instrument being wielded by a mysterious, immensely powerful shadow figure who wanted Jack Abbott permanently erased from the Genoa City canvas. The realization hit Diane like a physical blow. This was not about obsession. This was about business power and the ultimate destruction of the Abbott legacy. The discovery of the assassination contract opened up a terrifying Pandora's box of suspects who possessed the immense wealth, the deep-seated hatred, and the ruthless ambition to hire a master of disguise to murder Jack Abbott. Diane's mind raced through the possibilities. Could it be an old, bitter enemy of the Abbott family, a ghost from John Abbott's past returning to claim a blood debt? Or perhaps it was a high-ranking member of a rival corporate dynasty, someone looking to exploit the current chaos and vulnerability in Genoa City to execute a hostile takeover of Jabot Cosmetics. The timing was too perfect. With Victor Newman currently waging a massive, multi-front war against Sally Spectra, Lily Winters, and Billy Abbott, and with the Newman patriarch's health reportedly on the brink of collapse, the corporate world was in absolute turmoil. The mysterious employer was using the deafening noise of Genoa City's corporate warfare as the perfect smokescreen to orchestrate the quiet, surgical removal of Jack Abbott. Realizing the sheer magnitude of the conspiracy and knowing she could not fight a phantom employer and a master assassin alone, Diane turned to the one person she trusted implicitly, her son, Kyle Abbott. Kyle had already proven his fierce, unyielding devotion to his family when he physically tackled a disguised Patty Williams to save Jack from a lethal injection. When Diane pulled Kyle into the secret confines of the mansion's study and laid out the terrifying evidence of the contract hit, Kyle's blood ran ice cold. The young Abbott heir was horrified, but his fear quickly morphed into a burning, protective rage. He realized that his father's life was hanging by a thread, and that the police barricades outside were nothing more than a theatrical illusion of safety. Without a moment's hesitation, Kyle pledged his absolute allegiance to his mother. Together, they formed a covert, highly specialized defensive alliance, vowing to act as Jack's secret shield while simultaneously hunting down the mastermind pulling Markham's strings. Kyle and Diane immediately implemented a shadow security protocol within the Abbott mansion. While maintaining the facade of normalcy for Jack's sake, they secretly replaced the mansion's internal surveillance with independent, unhackable cameras. Cal began sleeping in shifts, his ears tuned to the slightest creak of a floorboard, while Diane monitored Jack's food, medication, and daily routines with the hypervigilance of a hawk. They were playing a deadly, high-stakes game of cat and mouse within their own home, knowing that Markham could strike at any moment, from any shadow. They quietly began tracing the financial breadcrumbs of the contract, hoping to follow the money back to the mysterious puppet master who had placed a bounty on Jack's head. The tension within the mansion was suffocating, a silent, invisible war being fought right under the patriarch's nose. Despite their best, most exhaustive efforts, the sheer cunning of a professional assassin like Markham meant that danger inevitably slipped through the cracks. The theoretical threat quickly evolved into terrifying, tangible reality as Jack Abbott began experiencing a series of highly suspicious, near-fatal accidents. It started subtly, a heavy, antique chandelier crashing to the floor of the foyer mere seconds after Jack had walked beneath it. Jack brushed it off as a structural failure, a bizarre coincidence. But then came the tampered medication. Diane, acting on her heightened paranoia, intercepted a newly delivered bottle of Jack's post-surgery painkillers. Upon sending a sample to a trusted, off-the-books lab, she discovered the pills had been laced with a lethal, undetectable neurotoxin. Had Jack swallowed even one, his heart would have stopped instantly, and the coroner would have ruled it a tragic, natural complication from his stab wounds. The undeniable, chilling evidence of the poison medication finally shattered Jack Abbott's stubborn wall of denial. When Diane and Cal presented him with the lab results and the terrifying truth of the assassination contract, the color drained from Jack's face. The realization that he had been seconds away from death, and that his wife and son had been silently standing between him and the grave, sparked a profound psychological awakening within the Abbott patriarch. The dismissive, recovering invalid vanished, replaced by the fierce, strategic titan who had successfully led Jabot Cosmetics through decades of corporate warfare. Jack's eyes hardened with a cold, unforgiving fury. He finally believed Diane's warnings, and he recognized that the Abbott family was facing an existential threat unlike anything they had ever encountered in their storied history. With Jack finally fully aware of the lethal conspiracy surrounding him, the dynamic within the Abbott family shifted dramatically. The historically fractured family, often divided by internal squabbles and corporate disagreements, suddenly unified into an impenetrable, fiercely defensive phalanx. Tracy and Ashley Abbott, who were already on high alert after deducing Markham's true identity, were brought fully into the fold. The Abbott sisters, armed with their brilliant analytical minds and fierce protective instincts, joined Diane and Cal in the war room. They pooled their resources, utilizing Jabot's vast international intelligence network and their own personal connections to dig into the darkest corners of the corporate underworld. The Abbott family was no longer playing defense. They were actively hunting the hunter, determined to expose the shadow employer and neutralize Markham before he could fulfill his deadly contract. As the Abbotts consolidated their power and tightened their ranks, the psychological warfare reached a boiling point. Markham, realizing that his element of surprise had been completely eradicated and that his targets were now actively hunting him, escalated his tactics. He began leaving chilling, taunting clues around the estate. A single black rose on Jack's desk, a cryptic message carved into the bark of the ancient oak tree in the garden. He was trying to break their psychological resolve, to force them into a state of panicked paranoia that would lead to a fatal mistake. But the Abbotts stood firm, their familial bond acting as an unbreakable shield against the terror. Diane, fueled by her desperate love for Jack, refused to be intimidated, matching Markham's psychological games with her own brand of ruthless cunning. The stage is now set for a monumental, explosive showdown that will alter the fabric of Genoa City forever. The mysterious mastermind who hired Markham is growing impatient, the chaos of the city's corporate wars providing a ticking clock for the assassination. Jack Abbott, surrounded by the fierce loyalty of his wife, his son, and his sisters, stands ready to face the darkness head-on. The impending collision between the united Abbott family and the shadowy forces seeking to destroy them promises to be a battle of epic proportions. Who is the invisible hand pulling the strings? Is it a vengeful Victor Newman, a returning Tucker McCall, or an unprecedented new enemy seeking to claim the throne of Genoa City? The truth is a ticking time bomb, and when it finally detonates, the fallout will leave no one unscathed.